Okay, I think we're going to get started. We've got quite a big number with us already, and anyone that's joining us a little bit later on, don't worry, they can just thread through. So, well, first of all, if you're joining us from the UK, good evening and thank you, because it's a very cold, wet and windy evening here in the UK. So very grateful that you've all chosen to spend your evening with us. If you're anywhere else in the world, very nice to see you. Welcome, great to have you with us. As some of you may know or may not know, my name is Farrah Storr and I'm the Head of Writer Partnerships here in Substack UK and for Substack Europe. And some of you may, I suspect, have been to some of our masterclasses that we've done previously. Tonight is going to be a little bit different. So usually those of you who have come to our masterclasses previously, and we do them every couple of months, so don't worry if you've missed one. We'll be doing another probably towards the end of the year or certainly in January. Usually how the masterclasses work is we spend an hour together. I talk you through what Substack is, how it works, and we sort of go behind the scenes and I help you set up. Tonight is going to be quite different because actually what I thought is probably going to be the most helpful thing for everybody is actually to talk to some of the writers that I know and love who have actually been on Substack for some time, and they're going to talk to us about their experience, how they find it, the highs, the lows. We want to try and make this a very informal, very sort of open and honest conversation in the hope that it's going to be helpful for those of you who either have a Substack already or are maybe thinking about joining Substack or making it a home for some of your work and your writing. So we've got three fabulous panelists who I'm going to introduce in just a moment. But first of all, just a couple of things. If those of you at the beginning didn't hear this, we're going to run until 7 o'clock this evening, and we're going to have a hard stop at 7 p.m, mainly because one of our wonderful panelists who has joined us very last minute, because Rosie Burkitt, some of you will know, had to drop out due to illness. So Leyla Kazim is joining us, but she's going to a concert at 7 p.m. So she's in a hotel foyer, and she's very worried we might hear the soft elevator music in the background. I think it will add something to the proceedings. So we'll do a hard stop at 7 p.m. We're going to chat till about 1:45, and then after that we're going to take questions. What I would suggest you do is we have a couple of people of Substack who are joining the call this evening. So we have wonderful Hannah from support, and we have Katie, my colleague from the Writer Success team. If you put your Q&As or your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, so not in chat but in Q&A, Hannah and Katie will make sure they answer as many questions as they can, so we can answer as many people's queries. But if you have a question which is for one of the panelists or even for me, then if you can just put the name of the person that the question is for at the very beginning, and then at 1:45, when Katie joins us and we start getting through those questions, we know who to direct it to. And finally, you've probably already seen the chat is going wild, but if you've got a Substack, make sure you put your Substack in there with a one-liner about what you do. Really good way to network, find other writers or creatives to work with, and take it from there. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you first of all to our three amazing panelists. So first of all, we have Poorna Bell. Now, some of you, I'm sure, will know Poorna. Poorna is an award-winning journalist, author, and the former executive editor for Huffington Post. She currently writes a column for the I paper. That's a British newspaper for those of you who are outside of the UK. However, Poorna says she has increasingly felt that journalism is not the right fit for the kind of writing she enjoys doing, and therefore joined Substack just last month as an outlet for her views across love, career, fitness and body image, and pretty much anything she thinks is worth having a conversation about. Poorna is also the author of 4 non-fiction and fiction books and is working on a second fiction book out in 2024. Poorna's Substack is called As I Was Saying. It's brilliant and already has thousands of free subscribers and hundreds of paying subscribers after just a month on the platform. So we're going to touch upon that. So Poorna, welcome. Great to see you again. Also have Emma Gannon. Many of you will be familiar with Emma, I'm sure. She's the queen of Substack. But Emma in a former life was also a journalist. And in fact, she started her career as the social media editor of Glamour UK, which I did not know until very recently. Emma has been blogging since 2009. So she's an old school blogger, I suppose you would call her. And in 2016, Emma got her first book deal with Penguin for her online millennial memoir, Central Alt Delete, which then went on to become the hugely successful podcast of the same name and which ran for 6 years. Now, Emma made the decision to end the podcast just last year when she joined Substack, which I know we're going to talk a little bit about. Emma is also the best-selling author of 6 books to date, including her award-winning debut novel, Olive, and her most recent non-fiction book, The Success Myth, which I highly recommend. Emma's Substack is called The Hyphen, and it's all about creativity, writing, and well-being, which she launched in early 2022, and which now has thousands of paying subscribers. So Emma, welcome, great to see you. And finally, we have Leyla, who, as I said, has really been pounced upon this evening, but it's a joy to see her. Leyla Kazim is a TV and radio presenter, writer, and also a journalist. Leyla co-hosts BBC Radio 4's The Food Programme, is a critic on MasterChef, as well as the author of the Substack, A Day Well Spent, which she launched in June this year, and which has hundreds of paying subscribers and thousands of free subscribers. In Leyla's words, A Day Well Spent is a newsletter about purposeful living, covering self-empowerment, personal fulfillment, as well as teaching a slow and sustainable way of being to maintain peace of mind, body, and spirit. Things Leyla considers make up a day well spent. Well, welcome everyone. It's great to see you. I'm going to start, and actually, Emma, I'll start with you if you don't mind. Can you tell us a little bit about what brought you to Substack? How did you find yourself here?
Hi everyone, this is so fun. I love talking about Substack. So I've been on there for 18 months at this point, and Hamish reached out to me about Substack about 4 years ago, and it wasn't the right time for me. I had lots going on, but I've always followed Substackers, and I've been on the platform for a long time, sort of lurking. So I think timing is a huge thing, and I wrote a book about being a multi-hyphenate. I have lots of different income streams. Substack, I've realized, it can be a job, like it is my job now, and I wanted to make sure that I had the time and space before I went on it. So ironically, I really went on Substack when I was very burnt out from the industry. So the podcast I ran for 6 years was like a weekly grind. The publishing industry I love it, but it's very slow and it's very hard. It's hard work keeping up. And then the magazine industry was sort of dying. So I actually took some time off to say, what do I want to do with my life and my career? Because I was so exhausted. And I've just thought, do you know what? I'm going to write for me. I'm going to just go on Substack and feel very creative and just give it a go. Such an experiment. And yeah, 18 months on, it's a 6-figure business. So it kind of was an accident. This wasn't really that well planned out. So I'm just thrilled.
Leyla, anything that Emma says there that chimes with you about how you found yourself on Substack?
Well, I largely found myself on Substack because of Emma. I remember, well, I'll give a little history. So I had I started writing a blog in 2012, and it was about food and travel. And then I went traveling for a while. And at the same time, I started an Instagram. Then I came back from traveling because I had to sort of quit my old life before I went traveling. And started to eke out a career in kind of creating content about food and travel. But what was happening was the work briefs were becoming increasingly about visuals and about social media. And so my writing that I was doing on my blog took a back seat. And that was all fine for a while. And then I realized I really miss writing, and I'm actually forgetting how to do it with my hands. Like I was realizing I was forgetting how to hold a pen, which sounds kind of crazy. So to fill that gap, what I started doing was writing to and for myself. And I did that with journaling. And it was because I wanted a place to kind of write about the things that I wasn't known for, which I'm known for food and travel. But in the past decade, I've kind of realized there are lots more things that I'm interested in, which is kind of what my newsletter is about today. So I was writing my journal just to myself, for myself, kind of like what Emma was saying, write for herself. And then I think early 2022, I started hearing these whisperings of Substack, and it was Emma who planted the seed, because I've known Emma for a while. And I was like, what the hell is this? I keep hearing this word. I don't know what Substack is. And then I started to notice some of my friends and peers were moving over to it as well. And then I looked at it more, and when I looked into it and the sense of community, and was seeing how audiences were engaging with the authors, I was like, wow, this is a whole new world. And this is so what I want to be a part of. And I think this is the place where I'm going to start writing about the stuff that I'm not known for. And that's how I ended up on there. And I kind of went from what is Substack to launching it in 6 weeks, because I just gave myself a deadline and just did it.
And it's interesting, Poorna, I'll come on to you in a minute, and I do want to touch upon the idea of audience. But Leyla, whenever I'm meeting people and trying to explain to them what is Substack, because there will be people on this call who are sort of like, is it a blog? Is it a newsletter platform? I always say to people, the best way to think about Substack is think of it like a personal media channel for the individual, where you own your audience, which we're going to talk about. You own your audience, you can get paid by your audience, and therefore not have to rely on advertising or sponsorship, but get paid by the people that love your work. And again, we'll touch upon this. You can write a newsletter, which I know you do, but you can do video on Substack, you can do podcasts, you can do voice notes. Does that sound, Leyla, to you like a sort of, when you're talking to people about what is Substack, does that sound about right, this idea of this personal media channel for the individual?
Yeah, totally. And I would say it kind of takes the best bits of all the things we like about the other platforms and puts them in one place. So it kind of is a blog in the sense it's kind of like a website that you post and your post gets sent out by email. But it's also filling the Twitter gap, I must say, because I was a fan of Twitter, which is now deceased and long gone. Notes is so great for that. I'm really getting into notes. It's a way to kind of see what everyone's up to, and I guess micro blog, which was kind of what Twitter was about in the day. You can also put the podcast on the video. So I tried a podcast, just a one-off, which was an interview with someone I found very interesting. And it was so nice that I could do that and I didn't have to go to a different platform. So I think one of the great things about Substack is there are so many tools that will meet any different way you might want to communicate. And so it's a real hotbed for experimentation. You can go, I've never done a podcast before, I'd never done one. I said, but I really want this interview. I really want the person's voice in this interview as opposed to just a written one. Let me try it. And it's great. It was just great. So yeah, Media Empire, yeah, I would totally go with that.
Perfect. And Poorna, I know there's going to be lots of things that you're going to touch upon there. And I'm very interested in this idea of writing what you really want to write about. But can you talk us through your decision to come over?
Yeah, so I definitely owe Emma a sort of, because I think she was definitely part of what I was inspired about in terms of getting onto Substack. So Emma, I think you really are the queen, because I think you've inspired a lot of people to be able to do the same. So Farrah, you reached out to me, I think this was maybe last year, about Substack, and it was off the back of, because I use Twitter a lot, and I still use Twitter a lot, and I use Instagram, and it was about the idea of sort of channeling a lot of the ideas that I would put out there on that platform that people were consuming for free, and basically being able to channel it through Substack. And at the time I just didn't quite understand how that would work, and I was also going through a sort of a very heavy workload, and it felt like it would just be something else that would be adding on that I couldn't really manage. And I think sort of a combination of two things, which was that I don't think I quite understood it at first. So for example, I thought it was a newsletter, and for me personally, I know a lot of people have migrated newsletters, but for the way that I write and the way that I like to interact with people, a newsletter wasn't quite the right fit for me. So the thing that you touched upon, which is, for me, the thing about Substack that's so important is that community aspect to it. And what I understood previously about newsletters was not understanding how the idea of community fits into that, what the social like kind of aspects of that would be. So I would say earlier this year, a combination of, I think, I'm based in the UK, so our economy was really badly damaged by a lot of what was going on with the cost of living crisis and so on. And what the impact of that had on me was that as a sole trader, I do have multiple revenue streams, but the majority of those revenue streams were dependent on what other companies were doing with their budgets. So what I wanted to focus and work on was how to create a revenue stream that would be a bit more reliable and contingent on the amount of effort that I put in versus what someone else's budget might be. And I think that also coincided at the same time with this real disillusionment that I've had with journalism that's been taking place very gradually over a number of years, where I don't necessarily feel like, I'm a lifestyle journalist by trade, and I don't necessarily feel like lifestyle media outlets in particular necessarily reflect what people want to talk about, what they're interested in. And I still feel like the way that, for example, articles have the type of headlines that they have on them, the stories that are picked up are still actually quite old-fashioned in terms of how they talk about things, and especially when you then layer things like social media on top of that, right? And so I think for me, there was sort of this dissonance between stuff that I knew people wanted to talk about and were interested in, because I'm very active on Instagram and Twitter, and then this kind of gap between what was actually being written about, let's say in sort of more traditional media publications. And so I made the decision maybe about 2-3 years ago that I was not going to pitch to people any longer. So I usually get approached for writing. And even when I get approached for writing, the money that they will pay you is just not even worth taking the commission, because there's other more lucrative work. And there was sort of, I think kind of Leyla touched on this briefly, where it was like, I write books, but, you know, like Emma said, that it's so slow and it takes so long to kind of produce as one piece of work. And it was a muscle that I just felt I wasn't really using. And it's a muscle that, you know, I've developed over a 20-year career. And it kind of made me really sad that this was going to be the end of that journey. And so when I then looked more into what Substack actually was, I'd had a conversation with Michelle Ellman, who's also on Substack. And then we started talking about hers. She then mentioned Emma. Emma then had a look at what you were doing. And it just seemed like the sort of perfect place that had all of those components that I needed and wanted in one place. So it had the newsletter aspect to it, but more crucially, it had the ability for people to be able to talk to each other on there and to build a community. And there were certain conversations and there were certain topics that I write about that I just feel like on Instagram, I don't want to have those conversations because I feel like people are too trigger happy on there with their comments. On Substack, you can see that it's really considered, you know, especially from the length of replies that people have. And so it just seemed like a natural fit, really. And that was kind of my first sort of step into it.
And I think that's an interesting point to make. I mean, one of the things, again, which Poorna, I think I've probably talked to you at length about this, is there are lots of people who have spent many years crafting communities on different platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but have not realized, of course, that they don't own that audience. So they have an audience, but if the algorithms ever change or if they decide to come off a platform, then the audience goes with them. And what I always say to people is, well, you should absolutely stay on those platforms. You know, some of those platforms are incredible, but it's always a good idea to try and scrape those super fans, those people who maybe want more of you, to a place where you get their email. So therefore you own your community. And Emma, I think I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about this, because I think as a writer and as a creative, a lot of people are not aware of the importance of owning your community and being able to speak to them directly, and the value in it. Can you just sort of give me your thoughts on that? Like, were you aware of that before you joined Substack?
So funny you say that, because I've had a newsletter for a long time and it's actually really successful, and I had it on MailChimp and I had a really lovely design and put a lot of effort into that newsletter. So I've had people's email addresses all through my career, and I've known the power of the newsletter for a long time. But for me, it was the community I was missing. So I would get loads of replies to the newsletter, and I found that very overwhelming, because I didn't want to email people. I wanted like a hub so we could all talk to each other. That's the thing I've realized is, yes, people want to, you know, maybe talk to me, but they actually want to talk to each other, because what I'm doing is I'm curating and I'm connecting and I'm bringing like-minded, brilliant people together. I'm so kind of honored the people that come and really visit my page. But I also didn't really know who my audience was, and I've been publishing books for nearly 10 years at this point. I couldn't really tell you who my audience was. I knew I had one, but I couldn't imagine them. And Instagram has always made me feel bad about myself, and I've never enjoyed spending time on there. So what Substack has really brought to me is I know who my people are now, and it's been really amazing. And it's been quite surprising. Like, I'm not talking to millennial women, actually. I'm talking to women of all ages. You know, a lot of my readers of the Substack are over 50. I love that, because, you know, we have so much in common, and the topics I'm exploring are not just for my generation. And so really it has actually changed everything. It's broadened everything for me.
I think one of the things, and Leyla, I'd love to talk to you about this in a minute, but one of the things that I find, I have my own Substack, as you know, Things Worth Knowing for those who don't know it, but exactly the same as you, Emma, had no idea who my audience was. I presupposed they were maybe 20 somethings from my days of editing Cosmo, and actually it swings much older. But the wonderful thing, and this goes back to what Poorna was saying, is, and I suspect there's something to do with giving your email, is there doesn't tend to be a lot of drama in the comments. This is why it feels like a community. There tends to be this very long, very nuanced dialogue between readers. And often, and Leyla, I want to ask you about this, I don't know about you, but I find that if I ask my readers a question, or if I write a column for them, they don't particularly want to hear from me. They want to talk to one another about what they've just read or what they've just listened to. Do you find anything similar, Leyla? She with us?
Yeah, there we are. Yeah, it's just unmuting. Yeah, so the community aspect, it's interesting. I think with my Substack, the community aspect is huge with my Substack, and people do like to talk to each other. And I feel like, I mean, one of my subscribers just recently posted such a lovely note saying how my Substack was one of her favorites, not just because of my writing, but because of the community that had built up and support each other. So, for example, there's a community post once a week, which I post on Sundays, which I call Sunday Reflections, where I just give a prompt, and it's the way in which we learn more about ourselves and the other readers. So I post a prompt, I answer the prompt, and it could be about topics kind of in my elevator pitch, which is self-empowerment, slow and sustainable living, personal growth. And people think about it, they answer it themselves, and then I'll answer it, and then we all kind of respond to each other, and it's such a lovely thing. That didn't exist on other platforms. And
Sure.
that is the thing that, I mean, and I think Emma and Poorna have also said it, the community, that's the thing that makes Substack so special, that it's a kind of ongoing conversation. And I say in my about page, like, this isn't a newsletter where I talk at you. This is a letter where we just talk with each other, and we're a bunch of people who have quite similar interests, but we'll also have different interests. But there will be a Venn diagram that crosses a bit over in the very broad stuff that I talk about. And I just say, I was looking through the Q&As, and some people have mentioned niche or particular topic. I don't have a freaking niche at all. One week I'm writing about maybe a travel guide, and the next week I'm talking about the tyranny of too much choice. I kind of just write about what I want, but I would say don't fret about a niche, because that's also something I kind of still wonder, like, is it a detriment that I haven't got a specific kind of thing that I stick to, or is it a good thing? You get to find out. But I think if you start tailoring your content for what you think you should be doing, as opposed to what you actually just want to write about, then you're going to go down the wrong avenue.
There's a couple of things, and Poorna, I want to talk to you about this, but there's a couple of things there that you've raised, Leyla. One is, even though I'm just in the headspace of calling people readers because I've been a magazine editor for so long, but actually, really, your community, they're sort of like your collaborators, aren't they, on Substack? They're very much engaging with you. Sometimes they're telling you what they want to read. I know people on Substack who take comments from the comment thread, and then it's then the sort of the start of a whole column. So that's one thing I think is really interesting and worth sharing. Second thing is, which goes back to what you were saying, Leyla, about niche. Niches can work, but one of the sort of pieces of advice I give to people when they're starting a Substack is, I say to people, in an ideal world, you want your Substack to see you into your retirement. You know, if you're making good money, or if it's a side hustle, or if it's your full-time job, you really want to see your days out having a Substack which brings in good money. And so don't niche up too much, because, and that's why mine is called Things Worth Knowing. You want to make it a little bit expansive so that in 10, 20 years time, people don't suddenly go, well, I thought this was about tractors and actually now it's about lipstick. But I think a writer said this to me recently, and I think it's really true. What tends to happen on Substack is people are interested in whatever comes out of your brain. So whatever it is that you find interesting, they tend to find interesting. And if they don't, of course, they unsubscribe. Poorna, you've been a month into your sort of Substack journey now, and you've experimented quite a bit. And I'm interested in why you've done that and how you feel like a month in, and you've done a lot of writing.
Yeah, so that I would say, a friend of mine sort of said, oh my God, how have you like published this much? So it's been 6 weeks in total, but I think part of that is probably my experience with newsroom journalism. I think it's easy, but because someone asked me what the secret was, and I would love to say it's this, but it's actually just, you know, years of trauma of working in a newsroom that you kind of now actually put to use, and no one's yelling at you. But it's just, do you mean as in what my approach is to what I decide to write, or how to kind of...
Exactly. And it looks to me, but tell me if I'm wrong here, that you're trying different things. You'll do an Ask Me Anything, you'll write a shorter piece, a longer piece.
Yeah.
And I wondered if A, there was a strategy behind that, and B, whether you start to see a pattern of what people are sort of there for.
Yeah, so I would say that at the moment there are sort of like loose topic areas that I will probably want to cover. And so I think to what you were saying, I think that my kind of approach to it is that if someone is following you for the quality of your writing, it doesn't matter if you're writing about tractors or lipstick. It's actually what you're sort of there for is that person's interpretation of the world and the kind of the beauty of their writing or the quality of their writing. And that's my approach to Substack. So even though there may be a difference in pieces, for example, that I do for paid subscribers or for free subscribers in terms of how personal something might be, because only paid subscribers get to comment, for me, like the quality of the writing is always of the same standard. There isn't sort of a time when I'll kind of like publish something that I think is like slightly half-baked, and that is my gold standard that I work to. I would say that where I have ended up in trouble, or when I've published something and I've just been quite dejected by it, is when I haven't written it because it was the thing I wanted to write. It's because I'm chasing success on Substack. And so for anyone who's kind of like either just started, I mean, because I have just started, so I don't know how much wisdom I have to impart on this, is that I would just say that figuring out what that guiding point is really important, because there definitely have been a couple of pieces that I've published because I wanted to see whether it would contribute to more growth, like really on Substack. Would I say that those are the pieces I'm most proud of? Like, probably not. And actually what I've kind of realized is that they're, you know, in the same way that it might exist on other platforms, there are certain trends of types of content that might be doing well on Substack, for example, at the moment, that may not be the case, you know, in a few months. And so I think like being fluid and flexible around that to a certain degree is important. But that's why I also think it's really important to stick to your guns about what you think is what you want to put forward on this platform. So even if you are publishing something that may not have, like, I think the sort of one of the pieces I did, which was this really, really long piece on my sort of journey as a powerlifter and how I train and how I fit that alongside work. And it took so long to write that piece. And I don't know that it did particularly, like, let's say, well, if, for example, you're looking at statistics, but I guess it's something that people know that I write about. And also I think it's got a longer tail than like just, you know, that initial first week of stats. And so that's something I'm kind of trying and testing for sure. I don't really have enough data yet to say definitively this is what it is, but I would say that for me, the compass, the guiding point is to write about the issues that I care about, the things that I want to explore, the things that I want to be playful with in my writing, the things that I want to be poetic with in my writing, versus looking at other people's accounts and going, oh, well, that we have an overlap, that seems to work well for them, maybe I should be doing something similar.
You mentioned, and actually in the time we've got remaining, because I think this is what a lot of people want to know, and Emma, I'm going to start with you, because you mentioned your Substack now brings in 6 figures, which is incredible, and I imagine is a surprise to you as it is amazing to hear. But I want to understand from each of you, but Emma, I'll start with you, this idea of charging for your work, because writers ordinarily, as most of us know, I think one of you mentioned, Poorna, it might have been you, if you're lucky enough to be a journalist, word rates are going backwards, or they're the same as they were sort of 10 years ago. We see an awful lot of writers doing stuff for free, and there's a lot of people who will willingly write for free. And Emma, this idea of, I mean, every writer I meet wants to sort of be sick in a bucket, the idea of asking for money for their work. Can you talk us through what your strategy was for sort of what paid subscribers get and what frees do, but also your sort of philosophy behind paying for writing?
Yeah, I don't have a problem asking people to pay me for my writing, to be honest, because I've been doing it for a long time, and I think I have a lot to give in terms of, like, I've been doing this for 15 years. I think I'm good at what I do, and I don't think women especially say that enough. And so the transaction for me would actually feel wrong if I was doing it for free on Substack. I think it would feel really off. The balance would not make sense. What was really interesting when I started my Substack was people who had been following me for a long time, they were paying me before I'd even asked them to. There's this culture, I think, on Substack of a transaction, it's an exchange that makes sense. So the other thing is, obviously, the paywall is not just there because I want people to pay me, it's there for my own safety in terms of I'm writing very personally on Substack, and I don't actually write very personally in my books. Like I write business books, I write self-help, I write fiction. I don't write memoir in that style, but on my Substack, I will give you everything. Like, if you're willing to pay me and come into this community, I really am just unfiltered on there, and in a way, because I want to help. And so when I wrote about my burnout, for example, last year, which was really quite severe and kind of medically diagnosed, that for me, I couldn't write about that anywhere else but a paywalled Substack or any sort of closed community. And it actually was so healing to write, because we all write about our real lives, and to have a community there that would accept that and sort of understand it. So that's a two-pronged thing. Yes, it's great to earn money from writing, we all should, especially in a time with writer strikes going on. Really think writers should be paid, but also for the writer, it just makes you feel safe.
And Emma, when you started, were you doing, and maybe you still do this, were you doing a certain amount free and then a certain amount paid? Like, when people first came to the hyphen, what were they presented with?
So I think for the first few months, I was just finding my feet. Like Poorna was saying, you're figuring yourself out, you're figuring out the platform, I wouldn't have put on the paywall straight away because I still didn't really know how it was kind of going on there. So I mean, I know this is, a lot of people have said, I don't really know why you've done this, but I have just paywalled everything, because for me, it's a hub. It's like you're in or you're out, essentially. And I'm okay with that. I know a lot of other people are not going to do it like that, and they want to do some free, some paid. But because I had enough people coming and paying me straight away, I was just like, amazing. I'm going to lock all of this up and I'm just going to write for these 100 people. I'm just going to write for these 500 people. And then now it's grown. But I was very happy keeping it small.
And it's interesting, and Leyla, I'll come on to you in a minute, but that's one of the things actually you and I have talked about, Emma. I was always like, well, in the beginning, the idea is, and I say this to people, the frees are important, because often what happens is free people over time become paid subscribers. So there are some people who will do a sort of mixture of the two. But I know what you mean, Emma. You sort of got to a certain point, didn't you? And then you just decided, actually, I'm going to paywall most of this now.
Well, I also thought, and I do have a few free that you can go and read my stuff, and there's plenty of my writing on the internet, so you can go and read it if you like. If you like it, come and sign up. But a part of me thought there's 200 articles on the hyphen now. So if you think that's worth £6.99 to fill your boots with like 200 articles, I think that's a pretty good deal. So I'm a big fan of asking people to pay, basically.
And Leyla, what about you? Like, first of all, how did you feel about suddenly a brand new model? You used to be a blogger, so blogging, you were not paid for blogging. Suddenly this idea of, oh my God, I'm gonna be charging people. Did you feel safety in that you were still doing something for free for those who either couldn't afford it or perhaps weren't sure about paying? But did you feel sort of a little bit iffy about the paid side of things? I'm interested.
Yeah, a little bit iffy, because also I was creating a newsletter about something I wasn't known for. So people who might be coming over expecting something maybe about food and travel, but actually not getting that. But I turned paid on from the beginning. And what I did was, for the first month, all but one of the pieces were free. And what I do now is I post twice a week. Every Sunday post which is fully community element. So that's behind paywall, because paywall allows you to become part of the community. And then the Thursday post, what I was doing is every other Thursday was paid and every other Thursday was free. What I'm doing now is, because I really want the community to feel like a safe space for the community members as well, because they share quite personal stuff in the comments. I don't want anyone to be able to read them. And because Substack doesn't have the feature, you can make it where paid subscribers only can comment, but everyone can still read the comments. So what I've now done is there's a paywall on all my posts, but for the every Thursday one, it's a very big preview. So you're basically getting the whole thing for free, but the comments is totally outbound, so you can't even see it. And I might have a little extra bit at the end that's just for paid subscribers as well. So if you're a free subscriber, you still get a lot from those posts. The other thing I would say is I stopped using the terms free and paid in my text, because when I was reading it in Substacks that I was subscribed to, I didn't like it. It was like we'd been segregated. We were like two different groups, and I wanted to be in the other group, but I wasn't. So I just refer to everyone as my subscribers. And when I'm referring to something that's maybe behind a paywall, if I'm referring to the Sunday posts, which are for paid subscribers only, I just talk about it as if everyone is part of the group, even if they're not. Like, I don't use the term. I wouldn't say today's post is for free subscribers, tomorrow's post is for paid. But that was just a personal kind of how I reacted to that thing, to seeing those words. The other thing I would say is some posts. So I find that there are kind of two types of paid subscribers. There are the people who will pay for access to a specific post or access to a specific thing, or because they want a particular piece of information that you're sharing that is behind a paywall. And what I have found is that when I have like a curated list or my recommendations or that kind of post and it's behind a paywall, I'll get a big jump. But those kinds of subscribers are kind of short-lived, and some of them, quite rightly so, everyone can do what they want with their money. They'll come in, they'll subscribe, they'll read the piece, and they'll immediately unsubscribe. They just wanted that one piece. So you have to be conscious of that. You get these little ups, but then they drop off. And I find that the highest value subscribers are the ones who are in it for all the other stuff. They don't just want the actual words written. They want to be a part of the community. They want to engage with you and chat with the other readers. And those are the ones that are the slower burn and don't come as fast, but are the ones you want to keep and really write for. So it's funny because I would, a bit like what Poorna was saying, I would write a post thinking, oh, this should, I've got a nice list behind the paywall, this is going to get me a good little bump. And it did. And then so many of them would unsubscribe and you would just drop the same amount after a month. So kind of like Poorna was saying, don't write with the thing of this is going to get me a bunch of paid subs. Just write what you want, because it's funny, the ones you think aren't going to do well are the ones that do. and
Yeah.
vice versa. You kind of can't predict it. And also write things that, so again, I kind of split my post in two. This one I would like to get a lot of free subscribers with, because I'm still building my audience, it's still quite small. And this one maybe is more to get paid subscribers. If you feel like you do need a boost in one or the other, you can kind of use that a little bit.
And Poorna, just in the couple of minutes before we start taking questions, you're 6 weeks in. Just very quickly, is a lot of this resonating about this paid versus free? Like, talk to us a little bit about how you started, and also, because you're a journalist and you're still doing your column, this fear, because there'll be a lot of people on this call going, well, who's going to pay for my work when they can read so much out there for free? Like, what was your approach to that?
Yeah, because I launched mine in the week that I think everyone was moaning about Spotify raising their rates, and it was so negligible. And I just thought, oh my God, I'm about to launch a Substack. Is anyone going to pay for that if they're moaning about, you know, £11 a month for unlimited music? But I think what kind of gave me the confidence was more the community that I had on Instagram, and using that as a model for something that could then potentially work on Substack, and how to build that community. Because on Instagram, I'm very lucky in that I don't get trolled a lot, and my followers talk to each other. And so that's what I'm trying to kind of migrate over to Substack. And so in terms of knowing that there would be some people that would pay for that content, I think I felt relatively assured knowing that there would be some people. However, the not danger, but the problem has been basically wanting to offer the moon on a stick to my paid subscribers, and just knowing how to measure that out and how to make it in a way that's consistent for me to be able to do that. And to kind of Leyla's point, yeah, absolutely, making, you know, my free subscribers feel like they are sort of part of they are a very fundamental part of my community. However, currently at the moment, because I am trying to grow the sort of the paid subscribers part of things, because it will just enable me to be able to write more, really, is that I'm still working out where that line is of how to encourage people to decide that they want to upgrade from a free membership or to support with a paid membership. I'm completely to Emma's point, which is that sort of asking people to pay for content. We now have been living in an era of digital writing and journalism for decades. So the idea that this is not something that we should pay for, there's no other industry in which we would expect people to produce this for free. So I also don't have a problem charging for my work. And I still do have like free subscriptions, because, you know, I do understand that there are some people that just might not be able to afford it. Some people are sitting on the fence, but it is definitely, I'm having a think of how to grow that paid subscription part of it in a more sustainable way, where they're not just like signing up to it and then sort of clicking off, you know, after they've read the article.
Just because we're almost at 10 to, we're going to take some questions now. Thank you so much all. Just for those who kept seeing a lovely little face kept appearing, that is Hannah, who is not a random person. It's Hannah in support, who has diligently been answering everyone's questions. So just in case you did see Hannah reappearing with the fabulous fringe, that's who she was. Katie from Writer Success Team now. Katie, do you want to start with some of the questions that we've had? I can see that there are a lot.
Yes, I'd love to share some of the questions. One that kept coming up, I saw a question along this lines from Lucy and Caroline, Sophia, Emma, and a few others, was growing your Substack audience, your subscribers, without an existing audience elsewhere. I was wondering, maybe Farrah, if you could kick it off and maybe talk a little bit about recommendations, and then maybe if the rest of the panelists want to talk about kind of like growth that they've seen from the Substack network, or anything else you would give advice on for writers without an existing audience.
Yeah, it's a great point. And obviously, I'm completely aware that everybody on this call had an existing audience to some degree. Basically, once in the very early days, and maybe we'll get one of the panelists to answer this, but in the very early days, it certainly helps to lean on your existing communities. So, for example, I think Leyla and Emma and Poorna, all of us would have been going out on Twitter or Instagram going, hey guys, there's this new place. However, it only works for a certain amount of time. So after a relatively short amount of time on Substack, I think I'm correct in saying it's 40%, generally speaking, 40% of your audience will come from the Substack network effect. And that's basically from you writing on Substack. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, what that means is you can basically be discovered if you don't have an existing community through a couple of things. The first thing is, it's very compelling, very powerful, is recommendations. So on Substack, writers recommend other writers. So Emma, for example, if you're reading Emma and you're like, I wonder who Emma reads, you go to Emma's recommendations and you'll see all the writers that she rates. And therefore, you're probably going to trust Emma's sensibility and go, right, I'm going to follow Leyla because Emma follows her. So, and I can tell you, I think for my particular traffic, 50% of my subscribers come from recommendations alone. The other very quick thing, which I think is worth mentioning, and then Emma, I might come to you for some thoughts. On Substack, you can use notes, which is it's sort of like a separate area on Substack where writers share their thoughts and ideas, a bit like Leyla was saying. That's a great way to get discovered. You should definitely be using notes. And then also going back to the community aspect, if you are writing a thoughtful comment because you're engaged in someone's community and you happen to have a Substack, so say Leyla comments on one of my posts, it comes up that Leyla has a Substack. So if you're reading her comment and you go, this is a really smart person, I wonder if they write, you very quickly see, and that's another way of being discovered. So Emma, anything to add to that?
I mean, yeah, I did have an existing audience, but to echo Farah's point, I imported 9,000 emails. I'm now on 32,000. That's a huge growth in terms of what's come from the Substack network. That's not all my Instagram subscribers. That's me being on the platform. So I know that, I've started off with a little boost there, but you can grow a lot from zero. I've seen it happen. There's so many examples of it.
Katie?
Can I just add?
Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
just add something to that. So I would say everyone has the community. The way I got to my first 100 paid subs was quite honestly emailing people, like direct emails, because I read this tip on someone else's Substack. They said the most successful way they got paid subs was to literally send, not a group email, take the time to send one email individually to everyone, because we've all got communities, we've got friends, you got, friends of your parents of your kids' friends or family members or where you used to work, or like there are communities everywhere. Email those people, tell them, make it personalized, make the first paragraph a little bit personal, tell them what you're doing. And in no time, you might have 5, 10, 15 paid subscribers and you'll be amazed. And that's what gets you started. So if you think you don't have community, you do. It doesn't have to be Instagram, social media. There's community in other places, and tap into it.
Totally right. And Katie, just before you give the next question, even though I think I had 20 odd thousand on Instagram, my first maybe like 25 paid subscribers, they were family, they were friends of friends, they were former colleagues, and they're still there now. So they're probably going to be that's why you should turn on paid immediately. When you're doing something new, the excitement and the generosity of spirit and people wanting to support you, it's probably going to come from the communities that you know really well, which is your circle of friends. Katie,
can I just add something super quickly, just because it was a huge help for me, is I gave away free paid memberships to friends, family, and people that couldn't afford it. And I still do that, by the way, if anyone listening wants one. Like I give them away because I want people in the community. So don't be afraid to give them for free.
Thanks, Emma.
Get started.
Katie.
Lovely. A couple of people asked about the launch moment, specifically when you started your Substack. Leyla, there's a question for you in particular about the first 6 weeks and how you talked about how you gave yourself 6 weeks to get started. Like, how did you think about those first 6 weeks, and any advice for someone who's just getting started?
Okay, well, so I have a post on my Substack called 5 Life Mantras Responsible for My Success. And one of those mantras is just do it. And it's something I try to live by. So once I had made the decision I was going to join, I just did it. But I gave myself some time, 6 weeks. I have to say it was a really busy 6 weeks with a lot of late nights, because I actually went from not even knowing what on earth it would be about to launching it in 6 weeks. So I first had to come up with what is it that I want to write about? And can I like distill that down into a neat little one-line description? And I have to say, the Substack resources, I basically read all of them, which itself takes a few days. This is why I needed 6 weeks. But I worked through them all, and they have really great prompts to help you crystallize what it is you are doing. And I would say it really pays to do that. I mean, at least it did for me. I know a lot of people approach it a different way. They just kind of turn it on and publish. But I'm an over planner. I need to have a plan. And so I in those 6 weeks, you know, I came up with the logo, the name, what it was going to be about, the frequency of posts, how long posts would be. And I would also say a tip with that is don't reinvent the wheel. Look at who is doing this well already and who you like to read. I 100% looked at every inch of Emma's Substack for this.
I'm loving this common theme, by the way, because I was making up as I went along, and now apparently people are coming to mind.
You are now the textbook. But Emma's Substack, I mean, a fan of Emma's work from way gods. And I was like, why do I like what she does so much? Let's drill down. And so I looked at it and I took a load of ideas. Just that, you know, you might have noticed, but it helps. But all of that takes time. So I do say it's really worth looking at the ones that are doing well and that you enjoy, and trying to work out why you enjoy them and use some of that stuff, because that's why we're all here, right? To kind of share ideas and help each other. So yeah.
Awesome. Deepa asked about how do you spend your time writing versus cultivating community on Substack? Would be curious to hear from the three of you about like, yeah, kind of the breakdown of how you spend your time writing versus kind of investing in your community.
Poorna, do you want to start with you, just because you're in the early stages? It'd be interesting to hear from you first.
Yeah, I would say that so on average I will post at least twice a week, and I started very diligently posting on one particular day a week, and that has just gone to hell in a handbasket. So basically part of it is because I like to be, when it is appropriate, I like to be reactive to stuff that's like around and in the zeitgeist and that we're talking about. And another part is just that depending on what's happening with work, I will try and fit that around. But I know that whatever happens, I will get those two pieces done. So I would say the lion's share of the amount of time that I spend on Substack tends to be writing. And then I will spend at least some time every day on notes. I love notes. I think it is a brilliant way to discover new writing. I think it's a good way to kind of also just connect with people that are following you on there. And I would say that a very large part of how my work gets circulated is through notes. It's not actually really through other platforms. So I think that, you know, spending some time on that is really important. However, I feel personally, and this has been my approach to every social platform that I have used, is that it has to feel organic, and it can't feel like a chore, because once it starts feeling like a chore or something that you have to kind of tick off your list, I think that ends up influencing what you actually post on there and the tone of how you're posting on there. So I would just say it tends to be something, you know, if you need more of a structure, I would say it being something that you kind of check in with first thing in the morning once you're actually ready to be on your phone. That's always a good thing to do. And if you're going somewhere that you think that might be of interest to your Substack community, you know, especially if it's like book related or whatever your niche is, that actually posting on there might be much better than, let's say, posting on, I don't know, Instagram stories or something, because you can't do everything all at the same time. So I feel like sometimes it's sort of choosing what you invest your time in and what your audience is more likely to resonate with and on which platform. I use like 3 basically. So I will adjust it to that.
Katie, we just got 2 minutes left. So I noticed that a lot of the questions actually, Leyla is completely right. We have answered most of them in our resources. So Katie, maybe you could let everyone know where they can find all of these answers.
Yes, I just shared one of our good resources on getting started, and I'll be sure to share as well on Substack. On.substack.com is where we share stories from writers about how they've grown on Substack, and also some of our best resources and new resources as they come out. So best place to follow along with writer resources on Substack is on.substack.com.
And of course, I'm going to ask one remaining question of all the panelists, but if you follow all of our panelists as well, I know all of them talk quite openly about their Substack and how they've made it work. So you can also find their sort of take on that as well. So finally, and Emma, I'll start with you. One piece of advice you wished you'd known about Substack that you know now and that you're willing to share with everyone on this call.
I think it's something I talk about a lot, which is don't be afraid of losing subscribers. As in, I think the whole kind of gist of this call has been sort of write what you want, follow your gut, live creatively in your own way. So if you see a dip, don't worry, keep going. It really isn't linear. Like my graph is all over the place, and it's doing really well. So just keep going.
Great advice. Leyla?
Emma stole my one, but it's basically, people will unsubscribe and don't take it personally, because it's not a personal thing. That some people like to try out one for a few months, go to another. I had a good friend of mine unsubscribe yesterday and not taking it personally. So it's all fine.
Oh, that's very good of you. Poorna, one piece of advice.
I would say write the thing that you would want to read with the compassion and the tone that you would want if someone was writing about you. Because I think that the Substacks that I've been most drawn to have been the ones that have just seemed so unique and keyed into that person. And I would think about what it is that you want to read rather than how clever people are going to think you are from writing X, Y, and Z.
I think that's perfect advice, and something I wish I'd have thought about when I first started. I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists, to Emma, to Poorna, and especially to Leyla, who joined so last minute and has now got her concert to go to. For those of you that didn't get your question answered, I'm so sorry, but Katie, do use those resources that Katie linked to. Make sure you follow us on Notes. You can follow us on Instagram as well at Substack Inc. And we'll be there will be more masterclasses coming up. So stay tuned. If you haven't started a Substack yet, remember on the link to this event, there is actually a special link that you can use to get started if you feel inspired by this evening. Thank you so much to everyone that spoke, and thank you to you for joining. Take care. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Farrah. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. That was fun.